let's go ahead and get started. The first strategy was the Missouri Waltz. So it was the 1-2 cash out was the strategy. There's a lot of text. There's a lot of things that that he went through here. A takeaway, without reading it verbatim, was he was talking about like tax regulations, or sometimes government regulations related to real estate do change, and don't be reliant upon that to be forever. And so he was talking about, as the book of the writing was in 2010, he spent a lot of time talking about that. In the end, there was one statement that a couple statements that he made that was a little bit, because to me it just looks like just a normal transfer of real estate, but thinking with the end in mind. So he says, the Missouri Waltz, on the other hand, is an exchange subject to one property selling out. The 1031 exchange comes from the other direction. It starts with the sale of one property and funds are held in escrow, and then another property is purchased to the satisfaction of the buyer, but in compliance with certain rules. He wasn't doing anything fancy here, but it just looked like the key takeaway was looking at having that next purchase or that next property available, and it was that next property becoming available that was going to drive the transaction. I don't know if I got that was the key takeaway for that, because he just pretty much talked about don't rely on 1031 exchange throughout the conversation. So, and then the last statement, he said, transaction should stand on its own feet without tax consideration. Did anybody else get anything other from that strategy, other than it was just sort of beginning with the end in sight?
Well, current exchange called a reverse exchange is more like a Missouri Waltz than a conventional 1031 exchange. So with a reverse exchange, you buy the property you want first and then sell the one you don't. That's kind of what a Missouri Waltz is, which is, I'll trade you my property for your property. Oh, but by the way, you've got to have yours sold for cash. So the old Missouri Waltz was probably before there was even 1031. So I've got a house. I think it'll sell. I put it on the market, start to find some buyers. But what I'm really trying to do is to buy another property. So I come to Wendy and say, I want to exchange my house for your office condominium. Wendy says, oh, that's great. Let's do a Missouri Waltz. I'll exchange for your house as long as you have your house sold. That's a Missouri Waltz.
I'll exchange for your house as long as you have your house sold.
That's the 1-2 cash out.
So with that, if you do the 1031 exchange in advance, so if you go through this, so you're going to get Wendy's price, you have the property, you're going to get Wendy's property, and could you go back by 1031 exchange rules and still get the benefit, even though you've already purchased the property?
Well, Missouri Waltz is normally not looking for tax benefits. It's looking to get out with cash. So that's probably a non-1031. Or you exchange properties. And today what you could do is go, Wendy wants my property. I will take your house, Wendy. But let's do a 1031 and give your house to the facilitator. Deed it to them with a contract in place. And then the facilitator will sell the house and fund my 1031 of my next property. So it could be just going down and out with appropriate consequences or no tax consequences, depending on your basis. Or you could be funding your 1031, but you're not going to take her house without the cash out. That's the key to a Missouri Waltz. I'll do the exchange, but one side has to have a cash buyer. It was originally not done for tax purposes. It was just to get out or to get to cash.
Okay. And it was, you were going to get, she was going to get the cash from you because you're buying her house.
No, she wants my property. Somebody's got to want the other property, and she has a house. So she wants my property. She wants to buy it with her house, rent house, not primary residence. She proposes at a marketing meeting, Ted, I'll exchange my house for your office condo. And I go, well, I'm not going to close and take the house. Do you have any buyers for the house? Yeah, we've been marketing. I got 2 or 3 people that say they'll buy it, but I don't want to sell it until I find what I want. Okay, well, let's do the exchange with a cash out. That's the Missouri out. 1-2 cash out. So let's exchange mine for yours, as long as yours has a contract for sale. You're through due diligence. You've got earnest money hard. I'll take your house as long as it's sold. That's the simple step, and we're done. I get the cash.
Okay.
Because that's what I was going to sell. I was going to sell my condo for cash.
Okay.
But Wendy didn't have cash. She had a house.
Okay. I got it. So
I may or may not be looking for tax consequences. I'm mainly looking for cash to do something else, whether I have tax consequences or not. So it's exchange 1-2 cash out. Mine for Wendy's cash out.
okay.
Then we can mix 1031, reverse exchange, normal exchange, all that other stuff in it if there's a need. That's my understanding.
Okay. No, that makes perfect sense, because he used a lot of wording, but was taking it. And I think this next one, so strategy 7, so real estate owned. So this is basically the bank has a property. The bank would love to get that property off the books, and just in my a few conversations with Ted Strawn, sort of explaining that it really hurts the bank in order to have this bad debt on it. And the way that I visualize this is there's good debt that the bank, or good notes that the bank has, and bad notes, and they want to get the bad notes off of their books because that's limiting their ability to spend. We went through and tried to draw up what we thought it was looking like. So we can see up here, the bank had 4 units that were each 250,000. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So there's 4 units that each were worth 250,000.
Is this the little tablet that costs like $600?
No, actually, we drew this up on a whiteboard and just took a picture of it.
Oh, it's a whiteboard and a picture. Okay.
And the reason why we did that, because I thought we could talk through it and write it out in person, but since we only have an hour at it, we thought, well, let's just draw it up in advance. So
Okay, good.
We have to put this extra time.
A friend of mine's got one of these little tablets. It was really cool because he just took it in and he could work on it live. but it was $600. I go, wow.
Yeah,
We
I
don't
do
have
need
that.
one. We're trying to see if we can use another laptop and just use OneNote, but I may be reaching out to you to find out what tablet your friend uses, because there's some other classes I've been teaching. Thanks for
Okay.
joining us, Juanita. So if we understood this, this is the bank. So they had 4 residential properties, each of them worth $250,000 each. And the other person had some land. This was an individual, and the individual said, hey, well, let's do a swap, and you lend me out 80% of the value of these properties that I'm going to buy from you, and I'm going to, in essence, take out I'm in essence going to take out that money and buy my land that I just sold you back from you. So what was interesting about this one was when they did the swap, if I understand this, the person did the swap with his land for these properties. Even though this land now takes the place of the properties, that land is still bad debt, is what this implies. And I don't know the bank part of this or the accounting part of it, but it was the action of that person buying back the land by using the $300,000 of an $800,000 loan to buy it back. And where we got that from, it was this sentence here: you agree to buy back the land for $1 million, giving the lender $300,000 in cash down. And that was money or proceeds that you got from the properties that you just bought from them. And it says, and the new loan back on the land for $700,000, so that it's basis on terms. So it's based on terms that take it out of the scheduled category. We didn't know enough about that, but just taking these 2 steps, it looks like even though they were doing a swap for these properties, even though this property was bad, even though they did the swap, this still stayed in a bad position on the books for the bank.
Correct.
But it wasn't until that money that you took out in a loan for the properties to buy the land, putting $300,000 down and getting a loan for $700,000, did it turn good for the bank. And so then the bank now has a note for $800,000 for the properties, the 4 residential properties, and a $700,000 loan for the land. So $1.5 million of bank debt that's now good bank debt. And that's the way we had seen this one.
So would a simpler way be go to a bank and say, I need a $700,000 loan on my land? And the bank would say, well, we don't really want to make more loans. We're trying to get rid of some REO bad debt. Well, if you make me a $700,000 loan on the land, I'll use $300,000 or $400,000 as a down payment on your fourplex, 4 units. I think you end up in the same place. It's probably a little simpler.
Okay. And we were curious about that because we were thinking the sort of the same thing. What we didn't know if it had to do something with the banking and the way that the way that it was on their books. But that makes perfect sense. Does that everybody else sort of see it the same way or have any questions with that one? All right. I think I had another.
We did a lot of REO formulas 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to dominate this part of the session, but I'll give you 2 minutes worth.
Yeah.
A lender, when they have a bad loan, becomes a scheduled item as a loan. And when it becomes a scheduled item, they have to write it down. So they lose net worth by writing that loan down. And it limits how many good loans they can put out because they have to keep reserves for bad loans. It then goes from a bad loan to a foreclosure, and it becomes real estate. They have to write it down to like 80% of appraised value. So they keep losing money and capital. So when you're dealing with banks, and there's going to be a lot more of that in the not too distant future, where banks have scheduled items, meaning bad loans, and they have REO, which stands for real estate owned, or some call it OREO, other real estate owned. But it means foreclosed real estate that the bank owns. They want rid of both of those. So you can buy the notes, and we've done that with banks. Just here's cash, we'll buy the note. We're going to buy it at a discount because it's not worth what the face amount is. But the old REO formulas were more about the banks making loans on other property. The first REO deal I didn't involve a loan. It was an exchange of an office building for some condominiums, and they just traded titles. The bank could not manage, the geography was wrong. They wanted out of the timeshares or condos, and they took a leased office building from a client. That was just an exchange. I don't think that would happen today. The next step was basically, I'll buy your REO for $1 million if you make me a $5 million loan on my asset. There was quite a bit of that done, and the feds came in and kind of shut that down. So it's kind of hard to do the REO formula today. Number 3 on strategy 7, in all REO transaction, there's usually a lender making a loan. That is correct 20 years ago. Hard to get those deals today because the regulations have changed. But that's the old formula of, I'll buy your stuff if you make me a loan.
Do you see, or have you seen any way that people have, I mean, we haven't really been in a market for the last, 9+ years, 14 years maybe, that we haven't had a significant amount of REO available. Do you see any ways that people will think of ways to get around that so this formula would work? Or
there's always people like us trying to figure out a way around regulations. But it's just harder to do today because people took advantage of it. A bank would have $1 million REO on the books that was worth maybe 700,000, but somebody would come in and offer them $1 million. They go, wow, we want to sell our 700,000 asset for $1 million because we don't have to take a hit on our net worth. And then the second part of that, oh, by the way, you've got to make me a $4 million loan on this appraised piece of ground of 8 million, 50% loan to value, and they get it underwritten and appraised, and they make that loan, and in 6 months, they now own a $4 million piece of ground that's probably not worth 4 million. So that's the worst case or the extreme, but that's what banks found themselves doing. They were throwing good money after bad. It's hard to get done today.
But the scenario that you raised, if they had this $1 million property and they wanted to get rid of it, they've already written off or depreciated it by 20% of its original value, it's depreciated down, so it's less on their books. You could either buy that outright at a discounted rate and maybe get a loan from them, right? Would that still, do you think that?
You might be able to buy it at 80 cents on the dollar, but that's because it's only worth 80 cents on the dollar. It's not worth a dollar. It's worth 80 cents, or they wouldn't have got it back. And they might make you a market rate loan against that property. But so that would be maybe 70% of the 80 cents. So they might make you a 560 loan and you come in with real money, but it will need to be a market rate loan or it'll be a scheduled item. And they haven't accomplished anything.
Okay. Makes sense. Anybody else have any questions on this one? All right, let's go on to the next one. So strategy here, the don't wander is key to many transactions. And somewhere I read in the book, I think it might have been Reno or Bob, I can't remember, but I think it was Reno. There was some discussion where he said that he never wanted to work with the people that want. He only wanted to work with people that was a don't wanter, and that was the fundamental of his practice. It was really interesting, to hear his take. And you come to my office, and I don't work weekends, and it's a pretty set ways. But in this, the don't wanter is a key to many transactions. The way that we drew this one out was something like this. And the buyer, the person had land. Is it this one here? Yeah, I think it was this one. Let me see. I think it's the same one, but I did more. So he went through these individuals, and so he had party A. So he had party A, or party B. Here's B over here and A over here. I'm having a hard time trying to readjust it, but this is client B, this is client A. These were two exchangers that were representing these clients. Party B had a client that was a builder. He owned a rental house, he owned rental properties with positive income. He also has cash, or she has cash. She's looking for a development and a land exchange for the houses. So she's willing to give up her houses for land. This other exchanger, and we actually thought this would be a good one in our office to go through and share with the other brokers, maybe even in the exchangers group. I think this one sort of seemed like it laid the foundation of what exchanging does. Client B, another exchanger, was working with the client. This person had a building that had about $100,000. We made this up. He didn't tell us this. He just said that it was a nice commercial building. It was fully rented, little equity. It had a second mortgage that was coming due. This person needed a neutral position. Either that because the next statement said eliminate stress. Neutral position I thought of could either have meant didn't want to put any more money into the property, or also didn't want any more stress, just sort of wanted to be in autopilot with their property. So you had these two people, but in order for these two to do something together, there needed to be a third person. And so that's where the exchange model came up. So we started playing around with it, and we said, well, who would this third person be? And going back real quick where I said where I thought this would be good for our office to discuss is it sort of emphasizes the importance in the book where he talks about everyone knowing each one of your other colleagues' clients, to the extent that when an opportunity comes, you can help facilitate this exchange or this transaction. Of course, you're not trying to take somebody else's client, but by being aware of what everybody's wants or needs are, you can maybe find this third person. So we fictitiously made up what would be a good person that would help A and B do something that would ultimately help them accomplish what their goals were. A ultimately wanted less stress. B wanted land. So we said maybe client C maybe was somebody that was a little bit scrappy and was willing to build some sweat equity. Maybe that person also wants cash flow. Maybe that person has land, and maybe has little money down. Again, these are just making things up. And so maybe the idea is that client C could take over client A's property, the building. Maybe it could be a note. I mean, just so that the person still gets some return, but doesn't have the stress. Maybe it could be a total purchase. And this and client C could then transfer the land to client B. So something like that. I don't know if there's any other comments that you guys have for this one. That's sort of what we were thinking about.
What's the equity of client A?
We didn't have the equity.
Yeah, you do.
Did he? Well, we put this up here. We put the equity was 100,000. And I think we made this up. I don't think Bob shared the exact numbers. We said he had to probably be a $200,000 mortgage note due and a $700,000 first mortgage.
But client A has 100,000 equity, right? $1 million value minus a first and a second. They got 100 equity. Is that correct?
Yep.
Client B, how much equity do they have?
We didn't guess on that one, but I don't know. To make the math easy, I think we could say maybe say he has $1 million in equity.
Okay.
He owns the houses. He owns these four properties.
Yeah. So if the 4 are free and clear, he's got $1 million equity.
Mm-hmm.
And client C, who has the land, has what, 100,000 piece of land?
We didn't put a number to that, but yeah, we could say 100,000.
So the 100,000 piece of land does what client A wants. A wants passive, no management, easy ownership. And their equities balance. That's amazing. So nobody owes anybody anything. So you can do that as a two-way if the person with the land, if they want the apartment or whatever client A owns, you can just do a two-way there.
Okay.
Now,
So C and A.
yeah. Now, if the person with the land says, well, yeah, but I really want to own what client B has. You might go that way of I'll give you my land plus a 900,000 owner carry or 900,000 from a new loan and buy your property. But the three don't really match up in my mind too much for a three-way because B has so much equity, it's hard to balance unless somebody really steps up, and A won't step up. they can't handle their own property. They're not gonna put a loan over on B's. So A's the one that has to step up.
Okay. So maybe if C, if that land was worth $1 million,
They can do a
then
deal with B, but your formula is the don't want her, and the don't want her is A. B
Yeah.
is not a don't want her. C is not a don't want her. A is a don't want her.
yeah, yeah,
So you got to find what they want, which is probably the land.
yeah.
And they're happy to sit there.
So the don't wanter has to drive, gets the don't wanter is the one that gets the momentum going. But you have to find that other component to it. How was, part of our discussion is we were talking about, so you have all these, maybe two, you start out with two brokers that are a part of this. And then you get the third person. You have agency agreements with, each broker has an agency agreement with each of these clients. And I guess it's really the way that you've negotiated your compensation up front, either a flat fee for helping this happen, or I guess it could be a dollar amount based on the transaction. What kind of things do you think about when you think about how you're going to get paid in this?
Mr. Strawn will answer that. Mr. Strawn, did you go to sleep?
Oh, let me unmute. I don't know if I have to ask you to unmute, or you're still on mute, Ted. Mr. Strong. You're still on mute, Ted. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Okay. You need to have a client who understands that you're going to get paid when this is done, and you have to create ways to get yourself paid. Sometimes it's cash, sometimes it's not. And there are instances, which I've had one in my career, where we had 5 properties being exchanged, and I was able, with the other broker, to be the takeout at the end, because we had enough cash and commissions. But it's you need to understand where your client is cash-wise to see if you're going to get paid. And this is where you have to be very careful who you select as your client. Is that what you wanted, Mr. Brown?
No. Whatever you want, I want.
So the main thing in all of this exchanging is to try to keep it as simple as possible. Because if you get a complex deal, it just has too many ways that it will not close. You have to be sure that you have understanding with your clients of how things are going to work, and deal with all of the decision makers in the properties you're dealing with. Otherwise, you're going to wind up not getting paid, and that's not worth your time.
So let's say client C has that 100,000 piece of land, and they buy either A or B with land plus cash or debt assumption of $1 million. You represent client C, and you've got a 5% list fee on his 100,000. You've got 5,000 of commission. Are you happy to close and keep 5,000, which is 100% of the fee? You didn't have to split it with a selling broker. So you have 100% of your client's fee, which is what you agreed to in your listing agreement. client A has $1 million property, that broker has a 5% fee. He's got 50,000 of fee upon closing. And he's worked out with his client that they have money in their account. If he finds them a deal that doesn't create cash at closing, they'll still pay him 50,000. And you've got to have that discussion before you go to the market. So you're at the closing table, and on the closing statement, it shows client A's broker getting 50, client C's broker getting 5. Is there going to be a discussion? Is there going to be hard feelings? Is everybody happy because they got what they negotiated for?
Yeah.
You don't want to wait till closing to have those discussions. So in the exchange business, a lot of times you'll hear about, well, the little broker on the land says, well, not only is my client bringing 100,000 of land, they're also bringing 900,000 of cash or debt assumption. So that's a huge benefit to your side. We should pool and split. So you put your 50 in the middle of the table, I'll put my 5, we got 55. We'll each take half of that, 27.5. Now we're both happy, and we both got more than what we would have received had we had an all cash offer and split with another broker. So you just want to discuss that with your clients and with the other brokers before you get down the road.
Okay.
I've had this discussion with one of the other brokers that's on the line with us, I think, and I will not use the name, but you don't negotiate fees at the end. You do it at the start.
Okay. And it reminds me, yeah, with the state contract where you basically have the box where the buyer is obligated to pay. And I think if you have that language in there and it's disclosed that you want the ability to negotiate, then you sort of leave that open. So that's good. Awesome. But that alone is a moneymaker. That's good. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, you got to have those conversations and probably work with people that are good to work with, especially when it gets a little bit more than just a straight deal for money. So we went through. We went through the first 3 versus all 5 of them. We didn't want to rush. I didn't know how much time these were going to take. So I think it's a good closing out point. It's about 10:15. If I have everyone's approval here, I'd like to share this video, just put it on YouTube, and I'm going to share it to some of the people that didn't attend. I think there's a lot of good information here, and still keep trying to plug away to get attendance. But anybody have anything they want to share or anything? All right, well, I think we can call it a wrap. And do you have a gift of, Ted, sorry.
Ramon, can we go back to the full screen so that we can see who all's on?
Yes. Let's see if I could stop sharing. This one here?
Yeah, so Wendy, Rodney, Juanita, Carl, and the rest of us. So any questions from anybody, or has this all been crystal clear?
Crystal clear and very appreciated.
And clear enough to who we go to and say, I need help. When we get in one of these scenarios.
Hey, I like the drawing on the board, Ramon. That really helps out because I'm a visual learner. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you have time, we've just been sort of putting together sort of last minute, but I think probably will generally happen is maybe Wednesday, the week before the call, we'll schedule like an hour to just pencil this in together before the session. And then I hope to run these over again, months later. We'll already have the benefit of the drawings. I probably do want to reach out to Ted to see if I can get a better layout for what would C look like, so this could be a three-way exchange. Like, how can we describe client C better than we did? So Ted, I'll reach out. Maybe we can talk about that.
And
Okay.
I'd like to add that if y'all have ideas, I went texting, that for this market, what are the best kind of ways of doing things? I think that could help focus us as well. We definitely went through these things and hammered them. And then Ted, you went over it and said, here's a simpler way, or, nowadays the REO isn't going to look like it used to. I think that would be, helpful if you all have any suggestions. And I think Ramon, as we look at these, the more complex deals, keep that in mind that they may not work just because too many opportunities to bust, as we already discussed that.
Yeah, and I keep going. It sort of resonates. Wendy and I had lunch with Cleve probably about 3 weeks ago, and he had briefly shared about a tax law in '86 that changed a model of investing that he was doing, and he got held with a lot of in-debt property that, because of the tax law that basically made the write-offs that they were taking advantage of prior to that non-existent any longer. And so from what Cleve had shared and what Bob was sharing in the book about the 1031 exchange, this might go away. Be aware.
Well, 1031 is.
Ramon, I noticed that strategy 5 or the 5th one that we did not go over, I'll just mention the unbuilt building, which is strategy 10.
Let me open it up. I have it here too.
If you were on the exchange group video Zoom yesterday, you heard the unbuilt building formula by Joe Valdez, who said, we have this piece of land. It's going to cost X to build the building. We're looking for a tenant or a buyer. So they're marketing the unbuilt building. That's kind of what that formula is. And if you were on the call yesterday, you saw it. So just wanted to mention that.
I think we went over it the last time, but I think it was it sort of like this one here? This was, let me share it. Sorry, I'm flopping around behind the scenes. You can't see. So you had the land. This might be different. Never mind. But it was a land in the shopping center that was the example. But I think we went over 5 in the last session. We didn't draw it out.